Let's be honest, a lot of dating advice these days is bad. And part of that is because the world of modern dating is so different than it was in the past. That's why in this video, I wanted to share 5 rules for dating that actually worked for my husband and me in today's world. I'm Cameron. I'm a licensed therapist, wife, and mother, and this is my channel, Modern Marriage, where I share with you guys all the tips, resources, and insights that I've gathered from working with couples in therapy so that you can start building the relationship that you've always wanted. Okay, first, for a bit of background information to put our relationship in context so that you can decide if our situation is similar enough to yours to be useful. So my husband and I met online while we were both still in graduate school in a relatively populated area, somewhere between suburban and urban depending on who you ask. We dated for roughly a year before getting married in our early 20s, young, I know, and then we had our first child about 18 months later. So with that information in mind, let's dive into the 5 rules that made such a difference for my husband and I in our experience of dating versus all the other relationships that at least I had had before I met him. But before moving on, please don't forget to like this video, subscribe to the channel if you want to see more content like this, and share this video with someone who you think might find it useful. So the 5 rules that worked incredibly well for my husband and me when we first started dating were: number 1, make the first date cheap and quick. Number 2, build the friendship first. Number 3, make the first expensive or sentimental gift an engagement ring. Number 4, don't make plans further in advance than half the length of the relationship. And number 5, stay busy with your own lives. So the first one, make the first date cheap and quick. My husband and I went to a pretty casual restaurant for our first date. It took about an hour and costed less than $30 for both of us. But honestly, if you can pull off something even simpler, like going for coffee or going on a walk, then more power to you. I really love this rule, especially when you're meeting people online, since oftentimes the jump between messaging back and forth on a dating app and actually meeting in person can feel like a huge leap. So the lower the stakes you can make that first date, the better. After all these tools we have to meet people today are only useful if they get you to that first date. So whatever makes getting to that date more likely to happen seems like a decent idea. Some people may disagree with me, especially if you buy into the idea that a first date should be a chance to evaluate things like a guy's wealth or generosity or a woman's willingness to split the bill. But honestly, if these things do matter to you, you may get a better sense of them after the first date when you guys have both had time to develop real feelings for each other. Next, build the friendship first. This one was somewhat unintentional for us, but after our first date, my husband and I actually ended up spending a few months becoming close friends before we officially started dating. It gave us a chance to get to know each other more and figure out in more detail what we both wanted our futures to look like and if those futures were compatible. Somewhat unknown to both of us, we also spent the time really falling in love with each other, and not for what we looked like or what we could offer the other person in the short term, but for our values, our personalities, and how we treated each other and other people. Every great marriage has a solid foundation of friendship, and so the earlier you start building that foundation in a relationship, the better. Of course, there's always a risk of ending up in the friend zone, but at least in our experience, this ended up being exactly where we both needed to be before we were ready to fully commit to each other. Next, make the first expensive or sentimental gift an engagement ring. This was my husband's rule, I'll admit, and I was not totally on board with it or didn't totally understand it at first. In fact, to me, it seemed like a little impractical, cold, and maybe even a bit stingy. But I chose to trust my husband at the time, and looking back now, I see how important that rule actually was for us, especially since when I didn't follow it with other people that I had dated and things inevitably ended, those gifts became liabilities and sources of grief more than anything. The more expensive or sentimental gifts that I had gotten from boyfriends who became ex-boyfriends later often made it a lot harder to move on. I'm talking about things like a boyfriend's t-shirt, or even a framed photo of the two of you, or anything that has sentimental value attached to it that you couldn't use or really benefit from outside of the context of that former relationship. And certainly more expensive things too, like nice shoes or clothes, jewelry, art, a car, or an apartment, aka living together. My husband preferred to stick to perishable items like flowers or food or handwritten notes. And honestly, these meant a lot to me at the time, and I did not miss not having those more sentimental but permanent or expensive gifts. Not everyone will agree with this rule, and I get it. When you're in a relationship and you're in love, you want to do everything for the other person. But even if not followed as strictly, this rule supports the basic approach to dating that until you two have made some sort of tangible commitment to each other that is public and serious, like getting engaged, you're missing the necessary proof to dive headfirst and fully give your heart away. For many people I know, myself included, doing this before there was a ring involved led to a lot of heartbreak and prolonged grieving periods when the relationship ended. Next, don't make plans further in advance than half the length of the relationship. In other words, if you've been together for, say, 2 months, then you wouldn't be making plans more than a month in advance. Similar to the previous rule, this was also one of my husband's inventions that I didn't necessarily buy into right away. However, at this point, I've met so many people in my personal and professional life as a therapist who have gotten burned by planning way too far in advance early on in relationships that I am now fully in support of this approach to dating. This rule also helped prevent us from overly committing to each other right away and rushing into a serious relationship before we were ready. In fact, you can think of future plans a lot like sentimental gifts. The more of them you have, the more your perceived commitment to the relationship increases, even when you guys haven't been together long enough to warrant that level of commitment. After all, how much harder is it to break up with someone if you have, for the next 2 years, planned vacations and holidays and weekends already, versus if you had only made plans for this coming weekend? I think this is particularly relevant when the plans involve meeting each other's friends and family. And lastly, stay busy with your own lives. Since we were both still in school when we met, we didn't necessarily have much of a choice on this one, but while dating, we both stayed busy with our other priorities, including school, friends, family, and taking care of ourselves by going to the gym and eating well and going to bed at a reasonable time. As a side note, going to bed at a decent hour every night is actually another rule that helped a ton, since the time when most couples say and do a lot of dumb things is late at night when they're tired and their emotions are heightened. This rule is really great for anyone particularly who worries about making their partner the center of their world, since the more stuff you have going on outside of your romantic relationship, the less space there is for your partner to take up. And obviously, as you increase your commitment over time, the two of you should naturally become more important to each other. But at least early on in a new relationship, the other person and the relationship itself should not be your center, since you can't necessarily rely on that relationship to last forever. Before ending this video, I do want to share that although these rules definitely helped my husband and I when we first started dating each other, the two most important things we both did while we were still on the market was A, be focused on becoming the best version of ourselves, and B, find someone who was not only a great match for the current versions of ourselves, but who would likely be a great match in the future because they were also invested in their own growth as a human being. I'll probably make another video about this in the future, but I thought it was worth noting here since, of course, how you approach dating matters a ton. It really does. But if you aren't trying to be the best version of yourself, and if you aren't dating someone who's a good fit for that version of you, then chances are no amount of dating strategy is going to make enough of a difference to justify staying together. Okay, guys, what did you think? Does this align with your experiences of dating in the modern world? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. Until next time, I'm Cameron, and this is Modern Marriage.